Viewer discretion advised.
Night falls. Hypnotic lights flash. Sonorous voices drone. And behind the curtain, the engineer deftly pulls your strings. Hello, freaks and freethinkers. I'm your host, Deep Amber, and this is Radio Ghost Town. Tonight, our investigation into the grand conspiracy continues with our Agents of the Antichrist series. And here's where things take a turn, where our nice, neutral little chat about the subtle influences society exerts on our personal perspectives straps on its parachute and jumps out of the plane. Tonight, we embark on a perilous journey into the uncharted jungle of brainwashing and psychological warfare. You know what's the first thing you have to do in order to survive a psychological operation? I'll tell you what it is. It's recognize you're the target of a psychological operation. And this one has been a long time in the making. Dr. Merleau, of whom we spoke previously in his book, The Rape of the Mind, explains how totalitarianism works, how it came into being and maintains its power. Allow me to quote. Mass delusion can be induced. It is simply a question of organizing and manipulating collective feelings in the proper way. If one can isolate the mass, allow no free thinking, no free exchange, no outside corrective, and can hypnotize the group daily with noises, with press and radio and television, with fear and pseudo-enthusiasm, any delusion can be instilled. He has described in brief what they did and why they did it during their scamdemic lockdowns. I mean, the physical isolation and their stranglehold over the legacy media and the online public square of social media. It's right there in black and white in a book published in 1956. The title only seems melodramatic until you've actually read the book. What Dr. Merleau witnessed and experienced and the horrors he saw on the horizon for the free world were very, very real and utterly deserving of that invective. Looking back on his work 70 years later, there only seems to be one thing missing. The acknowledgement of the master control, the unseen hand, the invisible governors, the man behind the curtain. However, this small and insufferable work by a small and insufferable man blithely lays out the eat the bugs, drink the poop water globalist mindset in a grand display for anyone who could stomach reading it. And many have. Many have. He is, or rather was, Edward Bernays, nephew of the not-so-great psychologist Sigmund Freud, whose legacy is lamentably still out there going strong and not doing a lick of good. Edward Bernays has been called the father of public relations, which is not a term you and I have problems with. We're used to PR departments, the concept of PR men running around helping corporations, organizations, and political candidates interface more effectively with the public. But the title of old Eddie B's seminal whatever should perk up our ears. Propaganda. It's an ugly word, isn't it? Leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Reminds us of the purposeful and deadly manipulations of war. We have the feeling of being quick-marched off to the front lines under false pretenses. Eddie B likes that word. He spends a good while defending it, but what he does not feel the need to make excuses for is his worldview. Allow me to read the very first line from the very first chapter. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. I know, even back then, to call it a republic would make their lips fall off. We continue. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. And 2 paragraphs later, he drops this little gem. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. Now, some of you recognize the esoteric/occult flavor of that last phrase, to bind and guide. Good for you. Teacher's proud. Additionally, this first chapter is entitled Organizing Chaos, and the last 6 6 words of the entire missive are, to bring order out of chaos. That's right, freaks and freethinkers, a little ordo ab chaos sandwich. In case you're new here, order out of chaos is the battle cry of the New World Order, the vulgar elite, the World Economic Forum, Bilderberg and their ilk, the you'll owe nothing and like it lizard people crowd. Old Eddie B was an elitist little plague of a man who rubbed elbows with the powers that be enough to convince himself he was one of them. He was not. But they certainly made use of his work, which was, by the way, published in 1928. Like I said, a long time in the making. Eddie B burst upon the scene in the advertising game, name-dropping his Uncle Sigmund and using all of Uncle Siggy's dirty little tricks. It was effective, and it got him noticed. In these 11 chapters, the insufferable Edward L. Bernays lays forth his very bestest argument in defense of what he alternately calls propaganda and public relations. We have been groomed to think of them as two separate entities, but they are the same, which makes sense. This is why we see the agenda being pushed by brands and corporations. Corporate public relations and invisible government propaganda are the same thing. Kinda always have been. Stay with me. Weird Eddie B lays forth his methods, which are still taught, studied, and built upon in a book written for the Ivy League educated hirelings of the self-styled ruling class, so that the unseen puppet masters, the man behind the curtain, can control your life and make you think it was your idea. As Uncle Siggy's little boy explains at the opening of chapter 1, we are governed, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning group. The man was a lick boot and a compulsive name dropper, and he gets on my nerves. On the next page, page 8, he insists these invisible governors are necessary to the orderly functioning of group life. On page 9, we get a second chorus of the same old tune with another brilliant deduction. The instruments by which public opinion is organized and focused may be misused, but such organization and focusing are necessary for orderly life. So let's see. That's organized, necessary, orderly, organized, necessary, orderly. The man had a mania for the hyperbolic use of the word necessary and an obsession with so-called order. That and talking about women's clothes, make of that what you will. Anyway, be on the lookout for repetition, freaks and freethinkers. It's one of the telltale signs of a psyop, and old Eddie B uses a lot of it. Earlier on the same page, he writes, it might be better to have, instead of propaganda and special pleading, committees of wise men who would choose our rulers, dictate our conduct, private and public, and decide upon the best types of clothes for us to wear and the best kinds of food to eat. Step off, commie. This is the mindset that has been drilled into the Ivy League types, the political PR drones, and the elite and near elite since 1928. No wonder. Another dirty little trick, which Shady Eddie B makes constant use of, is what we'll call subconscious association. That's when concept number 1 is linked to concept number 2 psychologically. And therefore, the strongly held opinion or emotion you have for concept number 2 is now unknowingly transferred to concept number 1. It happens all the time in mass media, movies, TV shows, songs, music videos, news broadcasts, books, articles, advertisements of all kinds. We must learn to recognize it and be ever vigilant against it. It seems to have been one of Eddie B's favorite ploys. Whenever he bumps up against the concept of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, he slips in a little negative association. The Constitution was written in a much simpler time, in contrast to the modern world. The Founding Fathers, in their backward, rural ways, seem to have never envisioned the future growth of the nation. The reader subconsciously connects the dots, linking the principles our nation was founded upon with words like outdated, unfashionable, simple-minded, and weird Eddie B's favorite boogeyman, chaos. On pages 11 through 14, he creates a negative association for the free and unfettered exchange of ideas among the masses. Our widely divergent interests and pastimes, our cleavages or rifts in society. The term is, of course, repeated and then linked to feelings of confusion and overwhelm by the publication of lists. Long, boring lists. Lists of groups he found in the almanac, of publications from a newspaper directory, and of conventions in Cleveland, Ohio. So many entries on each list, and each one a rift. He sums it up with this banger of a quote. Ideas are sifted and opinions stereotyped in the neighborhood bridge club. So many clubs, so many opinions. It can only mean chaos. Of course, the real problem is the vulgar elite and their servile lapdogs like Eddie here need to be the ones sifting our ideas for us. They must disseminate stereotypes as needed to create the ever-useful polarization of insiders versus outsiders, scientific versus science deniers. That polarization is, you guessed it, a big flashing sign that reads, "Warning, psyop in progress." Here's something that really made me mad. I wasn't going to take time to cover it, but might as well. While explaining the importance of universal and continuous propaganda in regimenting the public mind like an army regiments its soldiers, he starts ranting about the plight of the poor public servant who is forced to actually serve the public. The examples listed are legislators, editors, and teachers. They are helpless against the hooting, stubborn ignorance of the masses. These, as he calls them, supposedly powerful beings, are reduced to mere bits of driftwood in the surf. The implication is the conclusion stated elsewhere in the book, that these powerful beings should be the ones in control, that our thoughts, opinions, desires, the will of the people is at best irrelevant, at worst, domestic terrorism. Yes, you heard me right, and hold that thought. According to Propaganda Boy here, what the legislature does, how the media reports, and what our school systems teach our children are simply none of our business. Here's the subtle association. After lamenting the plight of the benighted public official who is not permitted to run roughshod over the will of the people, Eddie B suggests the sort of person who insists on having a voice in his government and control over his children's education by describing a man who buys the sheet and pillowcase costume and bands with his fellows by the thousands. Ladies and gentlemen, freaks and freethinkers, Slick Eddie B is calling you the KKK. Remember not too long ago when parents showing up at school board meetings were suddenly deemed terrorists and the powers that be acted like it was a completely legitimate call? Well, it turns out associating concerned parents with terrorists is not new. And to the vulgar elite and their trained monkeys, it is completely legitimate. He also says, a little later, the normal school should provide for the training of the educator to make him realize that his is a twofold job: education as a teacher and education as a propagandist. Mission accomplished. To them, we exist to be controlled and exploited. As Eddie B said on page 27, clearly, it is the intelligent minorities which need to make use of propaganda continuously and systematically. Only through the active energy of the intelligent few can the public at large become aware of and act upon new ideas. Elsewhere, he says, ours must be a leadership democracy administered by the intelligent minority who know how to regiment and guide the masses, the elitist little twit. By the way, it seems to have been creepy Eddie B who first hit upon the idea of using influencers and authority figures to control public thought. As Eddie B puts it, creating circumstances and dramatizing personalities. They've been grooming us to fall for it, hook, line, and sinker for 100 years. No wonder 2024 came as such a blow. And I'll tell you a secret. When you see authority figures and experts coming out of the woodwork to share the exact same opinion, especially about topics that aren't their areas of expertise, say For example, some kind of gross old computer programmer dude acting like he has a PhD in infectious diseases. That's another warning sign of a psyop. So, to review. Tonight we learned the 3 warning signs to indicate we're the target of a psyop. Repetition. This includes ad nauseum news reports all spouting the same talking points. Division and polarization, e.g. the scientific versus the science deniers. And thirdly, authority figures and experts who feel the need to throw their weight around on issues outside their expertise. There's one more. We don't have time to cover it tonight. That's the triggering of strong emotional responses. Jot it down if you like, and we'll dig into it together next time we talk. Meanwhile, just in case you didn't make the connection, everything mainstream culture is serving up to you on a silver platter, it's all just propaganda. And if you can stand a bit of advice from an old friend, don't get cocky. Anyone and everyone is vulnerable to psychological operations, even the experts who teach us how to recognize them. Any and all of us can be fooled. If you think you can't, they fooled you already. Take heed how you stand, lest you fall. But you know who can't be fooled? The Holy Spirit of the living God, given to us by God through Christ, the sovereign master creator of the universe, wrote in his seminal masterpiece, the Spirit of Truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it sees him not, neither knows him, but you know him. For he shall be in you, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said to you. That's John 14. You need the Spirit of Truth in you, my friends. If you want to survive the psyop, don't do life without him. Now, for the record, Satan is alive and active in the world today. He is your mortal enemy with just one goal, to destroy you body and soul. The good news is we have a champion. His name is Jesus. Jesus is the only way to God, and the Bible is our only source for absolute truth. Together, they're our only hope for salvation. I'm Deep Amber, and this is Radio Ghost Town.
We're living in precarious times. Now more than ever, we need to possess the mind of Christ and operate in the wisdom that comes from God.
At FlyByLightMedia, we choose freedom over comfort and truth over popularity. We hope you will too.
And don't forget to check out our merchandise through the link in the description.
And watch more videos.
Together, we are FlyByLightMedia, and we rise to shine.